All right, it's great to see everybody. This is the first of what I would consider a series of kind of somewhat interactive sessions talking about. I'd really like for us to talk on Wednesdays about the nuts and bolts of materials development. So I thought maybe we'd start with, we'll try a little exercise. We'll see how this works. Let's see. Okay. Can you guys try this link and see if you're able to access this board to move things around, do a little interactive brainstorm? It's a program called Miro. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Now it should work. I'll try it again. Does it take you anywhere? Do you have to do anything?
I accessed the link. It asked me to make an account though. I'm not sure if that's what direction you want us to head.
You might have to.
Sign up with my Google.
You might be able to just sign in with Google. You might be able to just use a guest account.
Okay.
But just don't sign up for anything that's going to cost you. It shouldn't cost you any money. It's just like an interactive.
It says, welcome to your team. What's your role? Have you ever used visual tools?
Oh, okay. You put whatever you want. We'll sort of see. Team could be like, I don't know, what do you want to put on there? Language ninja, language guru,
management material.
There you go. Supreme leader, whatever you want to put. It doesn't matter. So this program is called Miro. I don't know a lot about it. I do like interactive visual things. So we're going to try a little exercise here. And it's got like a million templates. And I'll tell you what, if you have an EDU account, which you do, and if you're a student, which you are, you get this thing for free, as far as I know. But you got to go sort of like fill out some form or do some, just do an internet search for Miro, M-I-R-O, and for education. And then you should be able to get it. It's a pretty interactive thing. So like over here, I can select like a new little thing to add. And so like maybe I'm going to put here like this is our world of curriculum. So what types of curriculum do you folks think there are? Now I'm talking like big, not like little individual things. It's sort of like kind of where we're going from the big picture to the smaller and smaller.
Like concepts? Is that what you're looking for?
Sort of, or just like, here, I'll give you one. So I'll say like printed material. And we could even put something in between that if we wanted to do sort of concept, or there's a bunch of different ways like a brainstorm could happen. And I don't want to sort of interfere with y'all's process. And I'll say whenever you do some sort of open brainstorm, like one is you got to give people some guidelines on what to do, or else I think people will get kind of frustrated and confused. But I think you also, no matter what your process is, yeah, okay, so going back real quick, I think the first link I sent was before I just said anybody can access this. So maybe if you tried the first link, you shouldn't have to create an account. If you try the second link, you should be able to just, I don't know if you just put your name in. I don't know what it looks like on your end, but the first link, it wasn't ready. But just as far as, so I'm trying to think of like, while I'm talking, put up types of things, and we can move stuff around. We do anything we want. But the one thing I would ask is try not to delete anybody's idea or change it. So we're in this, I think any planning process has to have a pretty distinct harvesting process, and you separate that from the editing process. I think you really have to do those things. Oh, and Ganesh for reposting the link in the chat. Because you don't want to interfere with the process of brainstorming, right? So this is just an example here. So we got printed material. I made this cool colored one. You could change the color up here. I'll make it blue. Maybe I like that green after all, or whatever it was. And so I've got videos, right? So I'm gonna have videos, I'm gonna have printed material. Maybe I'll throw another sticky on here. What I'm gonna do, I'll do pink maybe. Maybe that's close, too close to that one. So now I'll try like this. Audio, maybe I need some audio stuff. So that, like, where am I gonna put this stuff? Maybe I'll put it over here. And I think I can, how do I get a line like this? Like that, I can make a little line to it. And then this one over here. So you just drag stuff wherever you want, right? And then under printed material, I don't know what this box is. What's this? 18, is that you? So we can also make these things a little bigger. And someone put, huh?
Trying to unselect it. I don't know what's going on.
Huh?
I was trying to unselect it. I don't.
Oh, good. And so we're just sort of taking a drive, figuring this thing out, taking a look at it. But one of the things, we're basically adding like a whole bunch of little sticky notes. And we're going to write things on the little sticky notes. But I want us to just spend some time thinking and talking about all the different types of curriculum that are out there. And so I'm thinking of like, what are the things that we need to make in order to teach and use the language, like as far as education goes. So again, under printed materials, now we can have books, but there might be other things too. So I'll add another, maybe same color note over here and say, over here. And maybe we also need posters. And then there's this little arrow thing. So I can do another arrow from here to here. And so it kind of just creates a lot of the flow kind of for you, right? And so what other type, let's see. So I got audio, video.
PDF.
What's that?
PDF.
PDF, yeah. So then under printed materials, maybe we need to also sort of say printed material and digital.
Maybe it's like digital materials.
Yeah, so like digital. Or maybe we just need to say printed and digital materials, right? So these are sort of like, but then we can sort of refine this a little bit more. It's like, yeah, these are kind of like dictionaries and learning things and like, and even I'm gonna delete this line and get rid of some stuff. A lot of this they're just templates. If it's blank, you can get rid of it, but feel free to just start adding stuff. I don't know why the huh is here. So like even under books, like what if I picked a different color? Like I'll say, okay, well, let's go purple. And under books, there's gonna be like dictionaries and grammars. Well, I don't want it to look like that. So maybe I need to make it a little smaller. I'll put a little arrow to here. And then I could probably copy and just paste that. So we also need literature. Don't we need our own literature?
And then under literature, maybe like stories and pamphlets or?
Yeah, so under here, so maybe I'll pick even a different color. I don't know. And so under literature, we might have, so here I'm gonna create two categories, right? So we might have traditional stories, and we've got to treat that a little differently than just new news stories, right? Whatever we want to call them, right? So for example, making a book in your language doesn't have to be like a super hard, I mean, it's gonna be hard, but you could just take two people, follow them around with a camera, take a bunch of pictures, pick some of those pictures and just say sentences. Just say, so-and-so and so-and-so are going to the store. They're gonna buy some apples. They're gonna cook boiled fish tonight. So they're gonna get some potatoes, right? Because I think also under literature, you're probably gonna have, so here's news stories. And then we might even have another one, which is gonna be translated works. Well, if I wanna have snow day in Hutkil or Smelgach, or I want a big bird. There's a big bird goes to Navajo country, kills a sheep, eats it. It's great. That's actually, I don't know if they kill it, but they eat it. Okay. Yeah, posters, books. What else are we doing here? Audio, video blogging, workout videos. Great. I'm gonna also add over here recordings.
Apps,
Oh yeah,
virtual reality,
like that. It's something. Oh sure.
games.
So let's go. Maybe I'll go down here. And what's a term that could encompass like games, apps, or maybe those should, let's just say games and apps. Yep. But then I've already got a green, so let me, if I click on this, I can change the color. So I'm gonna make this this kind of light blue.
It's almost like software
Yeah, so all of this, and so
technology.
what I think stuff like this helps us do is also like envision like, okay, what's all the stuff we need? And now in terms of what are the human resources we need to go do this? Someone's gonna have to go learn how to make apps, or we're gonna have to hire somebody. So here, I'm gonna put under here, same thing. Oops. So I'm gonna put board games. I've been talking for years with some students about making a big interactive role-playing game that's just like in our territories. And if we could make a similar thing for all of our languages where you gotta like get enough resources and trade for canoes and do all kinds of stuff, right? So board games, yeah, church. Maps, yeah, okay. So we could do sort of interactive. What happens if I put this? So I'm gonna put chart under, grab this arrow, move it there. So I'm not like getting rid of anybody's idea. I'm just gonna add to it. So I'm gonna say, oops, I just put type there. So we're gonna put keyboards, and then we might have chart and maybe some other things there. I need to make a new. Okay, awesome. There's this whole sort of, but I guess for here, I think we also need learning. So you're gonna have some sort of electronic dictionary maybe, or something like that. What happens? Where am I gonna put this? Oh, look at that, I can move that thing around. And then put over here, video games. Can't spell. Right. What I do in a day. Oh, nice. Connect to video. Okay.
Do we have plays on there?
No, so here, this, let's have this under literature, right?
And under plays, maybe native theater being one of the subjects.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is interesting because we can also, so maybe what we end up doing is sort of move these ones down. Right, because the traditional stories, like there's just some different things there, like there's some things you might not be able to change a whole lot, but new stories, you can just sort of make them. So then maybe I'll make this one a little bigger. So maybe oh, I see. Cool, I can just click on that. Wow, okay, that was interesting. I want that S to not be down there. How are we gonna do that? Okay. So then we might have books. And then we might have, so some of this stuff is going to be interrelated, right? So film. Go crazy with these arrows for a sec. I don't know, maybe I don't need all those arrows.
All the arrows.
Some other way to connect. Graphic. I don't know what I try. Okay. They're all connected. Yeah.
Makes me think about Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, so and same, so like, and part of this work under translated could be, yeah, translating cartoons, right? Or just like tapping into stuff. Like Hawaiian has done Moana and Finding Nemo. Navajo's done Star Wars and Finding Nemo. So they've struck deals with Disney to just make full-on theatrical releases of translated versions of those.
One of our assignments last week in another class I had was Alaska Native Perspectives. That class Agatha is running, and they have a really cool Inupiat video game that they were making.
Mm-hmm.
It was really neat.
Nice. Brother Bear, oh no. Can we save it? Maybe. I don't know. I
We've
tried.
watched that 1,000 times here.
Connect to video. Nice. Dancing. Yeah. So under. So I think I'm just gonna create this whole other section. I think it's kind of salmon color. Because
What
some,
about,
oh, go ahead.
culture slides where you have photos of people doing stuff in the culture,
Oh, sure.
whether it be picking berries or carving paddles or whatever.
So maybe, and these things are on the, there's ways to tie them together too, right? So let me go with, I don't think we have yellow yet. So I'm going to say culture and history, right? So this is this whole other category, just sort of like, and then we can later sort of like, oh, we need to make, because some of these are sort of like the categories of things, which is totally fine. And then some of these are the types of things. So again, it's all totally fine. It's just an open brainstorm, because I kind of like the flexibility of this software, because you just click and just drag stuff around. So you don't have to know how to build websites or do anything like that. And then you can export these and you can move them around. Because I've been to plenty of meetings where you do this stuff in a room and it's great. And it's interactive, but then someone has to go through and retype everything. Whereas here you can sort of just copy and paste. There's probably other ways to export it. Here you might have migrations.
I care very much what you, the people, think.
Where would we put everyday phrases?
Oh, yeah, that's okay. So perhaps under culture and history is this sort of thing where it's just sort of like
Like instruction,
what's that?
original instruction.
Yeah. There could be all kinds of things in here. Like I know what a lot of language learners probably need help with is like, how do I just have a basic conversation? How do I reply to somebody? How do we stay in the language and talk? And so these could go under here. And so these are, so just sort of thinking of like, what are all the things we might need? Yeah, so. Because it could be, yeah, instructions, like how to do this, like how do you cut fish? And how do you do it in a way that's respectful to the animal, right? And so as we develop our materials, it could include things like take all those bones and parts and return them to the ocean, right? So like foundational things, so that we want to make sure with when we're brainstorming like this, one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, okay, we need to like teach a whole bunch of stuff. But how do we make sure we're doing this from a proper cultural perspective? Okay. I'll attach this to there. And put a few ideas of her literature, sort of like, I think you need stuff for kids and families. And then you're gonna need some different stuff for maybe adults.
Very cool. This is mind mapping.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Like I gotta look away for a minute. It's kind of dizzying. It's just been a long day.
So let's see. I guess under digital materials is maybe where this goes. I'm gonna put, oops, what are you doing over there? A big part of what I use to teach is like slideshow.
You, how did she say really? Could you? Yeah, okay. It was really okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Lance, when you have a very broad subject like spirituality, that become a category in itself, or that becomes a second sub?
Right. So, well, like this is interesting. Like, so as we do this type of brainstorming, I think what we're going to realize is we might have two we'll end up with probably two different boards. So another step would be like, okay, let's not stop what we're doing. Keep it going. Keep those little sort of cursors moving around. But maybe what we end up doing is we'll have one board that's a conceptual thing for curriculum. Like that's where we might put spirituality, history, song, like the content, like what are we needing to teach and how are we going to teach it, and then that's sort of like, it's more of the philosophy of your education. Like, what are you doing, right? So this whole class, like what we've been talking about is these two kind of primary documents, your philosophy of education, which is what do you teach and how do you do it? That might be where that component goes in there. And it's sort of like the subject matter. We teach about our spirituality. We teach about the animal world. We teach about all these different things, and there's how we do that. And then this is a little bit more on the sort of the realia side, the physical stuff. So like, what are the pieces of curriculum that we need to be making? And so one of the things also behind this, like as we see this getting more and more complex, and one thing we might do is sort of zoom out and then start dragging stuff away from each other so we get a little bit more room, which I'm sure we could do. But then what we might sort of consider as well, this one more thing isn't working, sorry, is one, like trying to think of like a step beyond this as well, which I think is doing a thorough assessment of everything that you have in your program, and then thinking about everything that you might need in your program. So I think the one thing that a lot of language programs do end up doing is duplicating some of the efforts. And so it's like, oh, let's do this thing. It's like, well, we've already got that thing. Let's do, because the other thing too is in the absence of sort of thinking of new stuff, sometimes we'll end up doing the kind of same stuff, right? Because it's sometimes easier to just kind of make another one of these things rather than make a whole bunch of new things. I think that's how I do it. There you go, look at that. Oops, I left the songs behind. Over here. Oh, am I gonna be able to get this one?
I don't know if you have a better way to word that, but I just put like that, what is not culturally responsive. Sometimes it's easier just to like compile something, pull it out, and then like you already know that all of those are, I don't know, that's like the no-go zone, Like we know what they are, but sometimes it's easier just to name it and just have it aside.
Right.
Or there's a better way to name it.
Where are you at?
Up by that yellow.
Oh, okay. Oh, sure. Okay. Well, yeah. So, I mean, again, like coming back to there may end up being a separate board that sort of looks at this stuff, because I think it comes back to me for this sort of, there's kind of these 4 points. Let me find this thing so I can show you what I'm talking about. I'm gonna stop this share. I'm gonna show you something else. Keep going, don't. But so more on the philosophy of education side, I've been exploring these ideas, and I was having this conversation with my friend Deho when I came up with this illustration. So there's this concept called hegemony that I find very interesting, and some people pronounce it hegemony, but I have a hard time with that syllable. So thinking of this, For me, hegemony is saying like, you don't have to actively try and destroy indigenous languages. Like, so people used to come out and just say that. They would make policy, they would do all kinds of stuff to just completely erase indigenous languages. But for me, things have gone far enough in that direction that if everybody just sort of does what they feel is normal on day-to-day living, then the languages just die. This whole genocide just sort of carries itself out. And so hegemony is a complicated thing, but it's basically there's a default identity, there's a default language. And there's also, I think it's the reason why a lot of people in education, if you said, you know what, let's just build a school that's totally in our indigenous language. Like there'd be a lot of people who would think like you're doing the students a disservice, you're setting yourself up for failure, there's something wrong with what you're doing. But I think a lot of it won't make sense when you try to press them on what they're trying to communicate. For me, that's the hegemony. And so I try and think of these sort of kind of 4 points, right? So here, and these things aren't in opposition to each other, but you have indigeneity, which would be, this is the total Tlingit consciousness. This was, if we all just spoke Tlingit or Hatkil or Smalgiach or whatever the language is, but if we just sort of lived in this complete indigenous way of thinking without any sort of colonized influences, that's where it would be. And maybe that's just something we have to imagine, but I do think that we can get to that point. Here you have cultural hegemony, which is just going along with whatever the sort of the mainstream or whatever you want to call it, the colonial culture wants to sort of do, right? Then you have anti-hegemony, which says we are aware of this and we are going to counter it. We're going, well, I don't know, I guess anti-hegemony is sort of like, for me, maybe this one is, we are aware of this hegemony, but we don't care, right? Or I don't know, I'm trying to figure out this sort of difference. Well, let me put it this way. So you have antithesis and mimesis, which is sort of like, I'm going to do the opposite of that. I'm going to go ahead and mimic that, right? So for example, here's an example. So hegemony could be, you have a standardized test that you have to give to every student in the United States. They all have to have the same set of knowledge. That's hegemonic. It's not going to have a lot of specific indigenous knowledge, right? So to do something that's counter hegemony would be, okay, well, we'll translate it and we'll make our own tests, but we're still asking the same questions. So it's not quite the same thing, but it is still kind of the same thing. And then for me, anti-hegemony would be like, we're not doing standardized tests. Absolutely not, never. You cannot make our students do that. We absolutely refuse to do that. So this is rejection. This is mimicking. And then, so this is accepting, and this is also sort of being aware and actively rejecting at some level. So I try and think of these things when you're mapping this stuff out, because even culturally responsive education, I think, is a little bit of an outdated term. And I think it should be culture-based education. That way it's sort of, we're gonna go listen to the Kiksadi instead of telling you about the Kiksadi. So that's sort of trying to take it in one step further. Okay, back to the board.
That was actually really helpful of a description, Sheesh.
Because I think every now and then you're gonna have to map this stuff out, right? So like if the kids really love some like Berenstain Bears, whatever, if that's the route you want to go, then you sort of analyze that and you say, well, is the culture of this thing effective in terms of what we're trying to do? And if it isn't, then you just say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not even going to, they could read that somewhere else, but then I can read that here in school. Okay, well, that was fun. I think we're going to pause this. Anybody got any thoughts or questions about this process? This board will be saved. We can go back and look at it. We could copy it and we can make another one. There's a whole bunch of different templates too. I'll show you some different templates over the next few weeks here as we sort of, once we get into April, we're kind of into our last few weeks of class. So I want to make sure like what's the most effective thing for y'all to be learning and talking about and experimenting. I do think a part of language planning involves stuff like this, and this could be, there's some different things that you could do as well in terms of what this program allows you to do and what similar things allow you to do that are really brainstorming and planning and policy development tools. So like there is, I think, a timer down here. So I could, oh, let me turn the chat on. This thing goes to full screen. I can't always see everything. What disappeared?
Cool board. I was like literally just gonna ask if there was like some way to like download it like via PDF for reference, but I mean, I guess I could do it again.
Oh,
So it was just really cool. That's all.
so I think I can do that. Okay. And I'm working on saving it right now. So let me put this in our class folder. Okay, so it's exporting now. So you could put a timer on here. So you could say, okay, we're going to do this for 5 minutes. And then I could say, change this to 5 and I'll say start. Do you guys see the timer? Does it show up when you're in? Okay, so then there's a timer. So that's a pretty effective tool because sometimes open brainstorming is sometimes really nice. And sometimes you say, okay, you got 2 minutes to think of this thing, 2 minutes. So you're trying to do sort of rapid fire stuff, which can stress some people out, but sometimes does help because then you can sort of do this thing, move on to the next thing. So I'm going to stop this timer and get rid of it. You can also, I can open this up for voting. I'll just do this as an example. So there's voting. So we can vote for 5 minutes. And what I'll say is you each get, we'll give you 8 votes. And then, so one thing that you can do with something like this is your sticky notes are ideas. Like, okay, what should we focus on for the next year? And so then you can sort of tally up and say, okay, we need to vote on what our priorities are. We need to vote on what our mission is. We put these 6 different drafts of what our mission could be for our school. And so then if I hit start now, I'll see what happens. So do you get an option to vote now? So I'm gonna hit vote now and see what happens. And so this isn't a real thing, it was just sort of an exercise. So I'll vote for board games and I'll vote for Indigenous writing. I like posters and books, and I want video games.
See, mine exited out. That's like it just suddenly just went away.
What you're voting did?
The whole board. That's why I was asking if I could download it. And then I realized that it just disappeared.
Oh, strange.
I guess I can try to get back into it.
Yeah, maybe try the link again.
Oh yeah, it didn't go. Okay, that's so weird.
Looks like you got 3 minutes left to cast your votes. And it's just a fictional exercise, right?
Oops. Yeah.
2 minutes. While y'all are doing your fictional voting, the process of voting for what you're going to do, I always recommend, even though we're doing this right now, like if we're actually doing a brainstorm and like we were at the school and I was like, okay, what are our focus areas for this next year? And so we might do a big open brainstorm like this, where we just, things are spiraling out and connecting and we're just sort of free.
Oh, I'm in class.
Oh, okay.
Then what I would want to do is have like a good solid, probably just the next day, wait until the next day or after lunch or something, get quite a bit of separation between the brainstorming and the voting part. Because some people are gonna, it gives people time to just sort of step away from it. I like a very open creative process before we move into any sort of editing process. And then to just sort of say, but then have a process and say, well, we can't do everything. So maybe this is, and try not to kill off dreams, but just say some things have to sit in the parking lot for a minute because we don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough people. 1 minute left. We'll see what the results are. And as you're practicing, you could practice with other stuff too. Like you could just have like, what kind of pizza should we get? And then you could do a quick voting thing like that. Do y'all have a timer on your end? Do you see a timer?
Timers are a colonial concept.
So are sticky notes, bro.
I thought we invented sticky notes.
Oh, I see it. Now you're down to 50 seconds.
Click done and I don't see a timer anymore.
Oh, well, if you're done, then it's probably not. It's probably like you don't have to worry about that. 30 seconds. Twenty seconds. 10 seconds. Okay, so I'll see the results. I don't know. It's processing. So do you guys see results or is it just me? Curious.
Of course it's me.
Okay. So, so this shows you, so there's different ways you could do this too. And you can give people, you can set the number of votes that they have. And so these are the types of things to think about. There's a whole logic behind all of that kind of stuff. But especially if it was in terms of like strategic planning, like what are our top priorities for this coming year? And so if you go to the Ahapuna Naleo and you really get to know those guys, they go 11 months a year, and July is the month that they take off. And so they're off for the whole month, but they do spend 1 week in July. So they are together for 5 days doing their annual planning. And that's when they'll figure out like, what's our motto for the year and what are our themes? What are our new things we need to try out? What do we need to work on? They do some team building stuff. So just really think about that and how there's technologies out there. Sometimes the learning curve is maybe too steep, but I tend to like things that are kind of easy to use. This, like I said, there's a whole bunch of templates for this too. Like we could try some different stuff, like some actual language planning in terms of, I like to think of things in terms of, I guess I like threes with this, which is, what are we going to do right now? What are we going to do pretty soon? What are we going to do in the long term? And then what are the changes we're trying to implement within our individuals and families? Then what are them within the institution and within our region? And then what are the state, federal, and tribal laws that we need to change in order to make those things happen? So tiny, medium, big, as far as like, because if you want to bring a language back, you have to engineer social change, and you have to engineer it within your own people. Then you have to engineer it within your communities and regions, and then also at a state and federal level, and also at a tribal level, right? So the tribes also, you know, depending on where you're from, you know, like is it a real priority? I was working for a tribe one time, and they had this immersion program funding. I was like, oh, immersion program, let's do that. That sounds great. And they said, oh no, that's just what they told us to call it so that we can get some more money to put up some telephone poles. I was like, why don't you just call it telephone poles? Just spend your telephone pole money on telephone poles, but you got one speaker in this whole community. What are you gonna do? And so, like, you know, a lot of it is just really challenging the priorities, because the priorities are probably fairly colonial in most institutions, even tribes, and that could be a really hard thing, and to engage in those discussions in ways where you're not being mean to anybody, but you're also sometimes trying to be real honest about what's going on. Okay, thoughts, questions? Okay, we're gonna shut this thing down. So I thought the next thing that I'd do is just demonstrate a few of the tools that I use on a regular basis to create materials. A lot of what I create for language comes down to video stuff, print stuff, and then teaching on whatever I need to put on the screen for teaching. So depending on, so eventually, if not already, you folks are going to be hopefully employed by entities that are teaching the language and working on developing content. So hopefully those groups will be paying for some of your software that you might need. Some of this stuff costs money. Miro costs money. It's like $20 a month just for one person to have it. It's a lot more for that for an organization. But an educational institution can get it for free. So sometimes there are kind of workarounds, right? Like, so if you keep your EDU email address, sometimes that gives you access to educational pricing. And if you're a language teacher, go for it. Just find that way to, because, there's a lot of these entities, they understand like a big business and stuff, like they'll have funding set aside for stuff like this. But educational structure, not all the time. Like sometimes you're just trying to keep the content going. And for language programs, you're just trying to get your language to survive and to thrive. So let's start here. So to make things, I use a program a lot called Adobe Illustrator. So there's a whole Adobe Creative Suite that I think is pretty great. You don't need to have it. There's other programs that deal with this kind of stuff. But basically, if you're going to be using and creating images, you're going to have to start doing a lot of this stuff yourself, or find an illustrator, so someone who can do some of the graphics for your program. So graphics, as far as computers go, images, you deal with basically two types of images. So you have a raster image and a vector image. Can somebody tell me what the difference is between those two?
Vector ones you're drawn out with like a pen, or even on the Illustrator there.
Right. Well, so
Raster size ones like get in there.
Let's see.
Well, aren't vector images, they're like resizable too,
Like
or like better,
the-
more like the resolution holds better when you resize them.
Yeah, so this is Photoshop. So like I use Photoshop and Illustrator a lot, right? So like we're gonna try and teach kids how to play violin in Tlingit. So I'm looking at this picture. I found a picture of a violin, and here with this fancy writing is like the name of the parts of the violin. And so I'm just going through. So what I'll do is like find. I'm proud of myself for coming up with the names for the notes E, A, D, and G. How great is that? Okay. But like, let's say, so if I found a name for the peg box, right? So if you're going to work in these programs, what you have to understand, there's an awful lot that happens with layers. Layers are very powerful. So like there could be something and then there's something behind that. So if I wanted to type a name for this thing, so I type the name of it, whatever I came up with, and then I could sort of drag that text somewhere. But then I got to go to this background image and select it and then delete what was there, right? So there's a bit of a process to this. There's a bit of a learning curve to all of it, but you can create really high quality images and things, right? So when you get done, you're going to have like this poster of a violin and parts. And you could do this for fish. You could do this. So this kind of educational thing is like, let me teach you the names for all of these different things, right? So like the fish, do you know in your language the name for all of the different fins and the eye and the gills and all the inner organs and everything else, so that you can then start moving towards the verbs that you might need: cut, remove the guts, cut the head off, you know, all these different things so you can teach how to cut a fish. But this is a raster image. So if I zoom way in, like so here I am, and so now you can start to see these little squares. So if I just keep going, a raster image is a whole bunch of little squares. That's what it means, that word raster. This is going to be a JPEG or a PNG file or a TIFF file. Anything, you take a picture on your phone, and it's going to be just, it's a whole bunch of little squares, and all of those squares are going to be a single color. Then you put those together and then you have an image. It creates the illusion of an image, right? It's not a thing, it's an illusion of a thing. And so the resolution, like, so remember, I don't know, when digital cameras were kind of first becoming a thing, they'd be like, this is like 400, you know, whatever, megapixels, right? They always talk about like megapixels. So those are like millions of, how many dots there are per inch is what it's sort of telling you. But the important thing to remember is this can only get so big before it degrades. You'd have to go with someone who knows a lot more about what they're doing. If you want to say, I'm going to make a mural of this that goes on the outside of the Tlingit Violin School building, right? And so, but that's a raster. So you're going to use Photoshop for that. The other type is a vector. And so a vector means, like, you can see these images here and you can see the words and stuff, but those are not individual little squares. Those are all like little math equations. So I could make this thing, if I wanted to print this thing 100 feet by 30 feet or whatever the dimensions of it, I could do that. I just go into the program and just blow it up, and I send it to a printer, and it never gets those little squares, right? It doesn't get degraded. But it's a little bit harder to work in. And there's some things I think someone's going to have to go into this, and it doesn't have to be you. It's not like you have to know how to do all of these things. But this is made up of several different layers. Let me move this little thing. So for example, I've got, I got animals, I got plants. Get rid of the plants. I can get rid of the text. I can get rid of these little zones. I don't know what that one is. There's the sun, there's the land, there's the sky. So like, so the nice thing about understanding, so each of these layers, so this one's on the bottom, this one's on top of that, but within each layer, you also have things that are on top of each other. And this can get really confusing. Like if you say, well, I want there to be water, but I want someone to be standing in the water, and then the lower half of their body gets a little bit faded because they're in the water. So you're going to have to do some creative stuff as far as what's in front and what's behind. And so whatever's on the layer, though, can't go underneath the layer below it. But, you know, you don't have to be a graphic designer to be able to do stuff. But someone's going to have to, right? Or they don't have to, but then you'll end up sort of just with trying to figure out how to make it as you go. So one of the things I do is sometimes I'll make stuff, like I'll just illustrate, I'll make a stick figure, I'll do this type of thing. But then I also get a lot through stock images. So like to find this violin, I went to Adobe stock and I just entered violin parts. And so I just looked through these different things. So here's one, I could have picked that one. You know, I could have picked some other ones, I'm sure. Or like if it wasn't even violin, like what if I was going like for a salmon? And so then this is going to show me a lot of like salmon that are cooked, right? But here's one, here's one. But so then it just kind of depends on what kind of thing I'm looking for. Stock photography does cost money. So that's the thing, is like someone has to get a subscription to it. If you're looking for an image of something, I can probably get it for you. Because it tells you up here how many, I can download 78 things right now, right? But you can also, if you go into this filters panel, it doesn't have to be Adobe. Like, I'm not trying to like push you towards them. There's other stock image places. There's other programs that do this stuff. But you can switch this to illustrations. And now I'm going to get these sort of kind of drawings of a salmon, right? And so I could take some of these and actually just, like if I wanted to get this, this is a JPEG, so it's going to be a raster image. So I can't make it big and small. But it's got a white background, so I could probably download it, erase the white background, and throw it on something else if I wanted to. Is that a salmon? So the other thing I'm interested is in teaching the different words for the different types of salmon, and this could show like what do they look like, and then what do they look like when they go upstream. So just different things like that. Have we got any thoughts, questions? Dasa? Oh yeah, yeah. So my kid, she's got violin class at 3:30. She's probably in here trying to tell me something about it. And I told her, go away. So. Okay.
A lot of good videos on those, how to do pretty much everything in like 10, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, and so you don't have to know how to do all of this. Figure out if there's something you're interested in doing, though. We could go through some stuff in here. Like a lot of this, I can work pretty good in Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign, but I just sort of like learn how to do it by just clicking around and messing around. And watching videos and looking up things, like I'm like, I want to know how to do this thing, and there's probably someone out there who's put it on the internet, right? So there's a bunch of tutorials, there's a whole bunch of stuff to figure out how to do this stuff. And with the stock, and sometimes I'll just go get something from a stock image, but then you got some things where it's like, oh well, that doesn't look like a person from here, so then maybe you want to just sort of make some adjustments. But those are sometimes political decisions, right? Not everybody has black hair and brown skin and stuff, but you can, if you had something where you're like, oh, this doesn't look very diverse, you can make some changes to it. Yeah, other thoughts? Okay, let's look at something else.
So Lance, if you're doing a repeat photography, what type would you recommend, the vector or the raster? image.
All photography is, if you're taking digital photos, they're going to be all rastered.
Okay.
They will all, but then it becomes a question of, and so this is another really good question is, like, let's say you want to make a book. Like, you don't need to have a $5,000 camera to go and make a book about what people are doing. You could get by with just a mobile phone and the camera that's on there. It's probably not going to be the best pictures, but if you could, and so these are also the sort of, we shift from the discussion of like the curriculum and that sort of brainstorming to like, who we got? And someone know how to, and so maybe what you do is you say, okay, we're going to buy a nice camera and we're going to send this person to go learn how to become a photographer, at least get the basics so that you can follow us and take the shots. And so, and some of this stuff does come down to, is this strictly for the language school and program, or are you going to go and make it available to everybody? Because if you're going to sell it, even if you're just saying, we're just selling it for the cost of printing it, we're not trying to like we're not going to make $1 million on this thing. That's not what we're trying to do. But if you just say, you know what, this book costs $15 to print, so it costs $15 because I can't just pay for everybody to have it. But if you just went on the internet and found some picture of a violin and used that in there, you could be opening yourself up for some kind of lawsuit, right? And so I don't sell any language books for a profit, but I do sell them because it's like, well, if you want the printed version, you can just go here and buy it. But that's why like stock photography is good. Anything, I think, I'm not a lawyer, so don't say that I told you this, but I think anything that a federal or state government publishes, so like if you go to the Park Service and they got a picture of a doll sheep, I think you can use that because that's public money, that's public information. But if like some nature photographer had a great picture of a porcupine and you use that without their permission, like they could come at you. And it's just something you want to make sure. And sometimes, like I was making, there's this part in the weather chapter for beginning Tlingit, and I was trying to like shift beginning Tlingit over to using images. So I'll show you. So this is the file for beginning Tlingit for the workbook. This is what it looks like. This is how it was made using Adobe InDesign. I see your hand up. Let me just say this real quick. But one of the phrases in there was, "I'm wet." And good luck finding a safe image of that on the internet. And like I was looking all over, I was like, oh, it should be like a wet dog. And like, there's so many. It's just like, yeah, I'm just glad I wasn't like in a library or something. Like, remember, like, look at this gross person, right? But so then I found one of like a little box standing outside in the rain. And so I found the artist. I said, hey, can I just buy the rights to use this in a language book? And they're like a pretty small time artist. They're like, how about $200? I was like, done. And I just paid them for it. I was like, here. Because then I got an image of a box in the rain. And it's getting wet, right? So you guys get your hand up, Sani, and Iskanach.
Yeah, I have a question about, your book here, your Tlingit workbook. It is, you wrote it, but it is put out by Alaska. So if I want to take some of the visuals that are inside the book and cut them up and make an index card, do I need to ask your permission or Alaska's permission?
So here's my stance. I will give you a folder that has every image in there, and I say use it for what you want. I have had people who get mad at me for using their materials, and maybe I go about it in the wrong way. But I just believe everything's out there for people to use who are learning and teaching. And so, like, if you took anything that I made and you made something out of it, rad, do it, go for it. If you can improve it, do it. I really don't believe in individuals owning particular things with the language. And so what I started doing probably in 2008, maybe, is I started putting into contracts. So usually people will pay you to do this kind of work, right? So if you're a teacher, if you become a teacher, it depends on where you're teaching, but you might only get like a 9-month contract. So you might not be working in the summer. So you got to go find some work. And people get all kinds of grants to make all kinds of things, which is great. So a couple things is you got to figure out, like, what do you need to survive? What is your time worth? And those are individual discussions. But I think also it's sort of a general cultural thing in America that you don't talk about money. And I don't think that's very helpful. So I would say if you know how to make books in the language and stuff, you should be charging at least $50 an hour. You should be making at least $50 an hour to be producing this stuff. And if you're working with elders, they should be probably making twice as whatever you're making. And so that's what I would do. And then the brutally honest part is, if people wouldn't pay my elders $100 an hour, I'd work with my elders for 1 hour, and I would write down 2 hours. And I would write down 1 hour for myself, because I'm like, I don't know, they're worth it. And so, but in the contracts I would write, everything that I create needs to be freely available for the language community. Because I don't believe if you took work that I did and then you used it to make, I don't think that's plagiarism. I guess if you just took the whole book and erased my name and put your name on it, I'd probably be like, come on, what are we doing here? But as far as like, if you want to take this stuff and use it, do it. So I've got a folder. So I don't keep my working files in a public space, just because I can't afford to have them. Like, what if somebody like accidentally deleted it or something? But I'll take all of the finished PDFs and all of the images that I end up using, and I put them in a Google folder, and it's called like just Clinkit Curriculum. So let me show you folks how to get there. So if you want to use this stuff, use this stuff.
I really do appreciate that file. I utilize it at home all the time.
Oh, okay. So at clinkitlanguage.com, if you go to curriculum, and we're in the process of making a website just like this for Haida. And it's a slow process, but if you want to help, let me know. I need some help on that. But under here, like, there's kind of these categories where you can look through some finished stuff. But there's this Google folder here called Clinkit Curriculum. So this brings you to a Google folder. There's a whole bunch of folders within this folder. But you could probably access everything that's ever been published on the Clinkit language here, at least as far as I know. So if you go to texts, you'll find it. And people have come for me for some of this stuff, because they're like, you can't just put it up there, people got to pay. I'm like, well, okay. But if you go to, for example, language, images, and illustrations, and then here's a whole bunch of stuff. So if it's marked National Park Service, like that's for open use. If it's marked Wiki, maybe. So like if it's on Wikipedia, you gotta take a look at the license agreement for the image, and I'll show you one in a second. But so if you go to here's like the beginning Clinkit images, right? So here they are. Here's everything, I think, that's in the beginning Clinkit workbook. So if you want to use any of these images, go ahead. Just, you want to make flashcards, you want to make study guide, whatever you want to do. If you want to make it into something, and go for it. And then if you want some image of something, let me know, and I'll go find it. There was one thing that was, what do you think was the hardest thing to find an image of in the beginning Clinkit workbook? Give you a couple guesses.
Raven's Nest.
That would be, that's not in there, so I'm not gonna go that crazy.
Hey, I have one of a raven's nest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh man.
it was
amazing.
above the Coach Cotia that we were working on at Harborview.
Oh,
Wow, you can sell that to the Smithsonian. 50 grand,
Free.
50.
Free. I'll give it to you. It'd be free.
start to-
But images of when things were like when animals were white. Of course, you just were talking about the book. Okay, never mind.
Any other guesses?
Okay, your question was which one was hardest? Was it soapberries?
No. So I can find images.
Scrolled past something and I was like,
I
oh,
got
maybe.
to see Alaska, right? Because they had a soapberry contest, so they just sent me those and gave me permission to use them because it's their book.
Oh, okay.
Any other guesses? Some of the little fish were hard to find, little needlefish and stuff. I kind of dig around. Those are pretty hard to find. But I'd say the one thing I could not find a stock image of or some public use image of, I'm not even seeing it in here. Maybe it disappeared. Pull tabs, rippies.
Oh,
That was so, I just could not find one. So then I finally gave up. I don't really do the rippy thing. If you do, that's fine. Whatever people do is fine. But so I went into a place that sells them here, and I said, "Can I take pictures of these?" And they're like, "No." What, are you kidding? I was like, "Oh, well, can I buy some and take them out of here?" And they said, "No, you got to rip them here." And I said, "Well, I'm just trying to take pictures of one for a Tlingit language book." And I said, "Oh, well, take any as much as you want out of the garbage." So I took them out of the garbage. I brought them home, and I took photos of them. So that's the story. The dry fish was also kind of hard, even though like I didn't have any dry fish at the time. So if you guys want to send me dry fish, so I have them for my photographs. It's for photographic purposes, I promise. Feel free to send me dry fish. But I had a student who took pictures of dry fish. The smokehouse was kind of tricky. There's a bunch of stuff, right? But one is like someone can be the group photographer and illustrator, whatever. Like, and so you're gonna need a certain number of these sort of skills. But going back to InDesign, a couple of things about the basics of InDesign is it's a publishing software. That's right. It's to make books. So it's designed to make books, which means there's a few things that this has that are quite a bit different from a word processor. One is you can't just sort of click and start typing. You have to designate where the text goes. So you end up drawing a bunch of these little boxes. There's a thing over here that's a box with a little cross in it, and that means that's a box with something in it. There's going to be a picture in it, or there's going to be text in it. So what you have to sort of do is organize a whole bunch of stuff. So some of that stuff could be, this text has the set of numbers on it. So that's linked to what we call like master pages. So each of these, there's these master pages, right? So the master page might have, I want to have a page number right there. And I want to have like something up here that says the name of the book, or what, any of those types of things will go into the master pages, so you don't have to put it on every single page. The other thing is you're going to have to figure out the sort of the framing of these boxes, right? So there's different views. So the preview says this is what the thing will look like when you print it. And then you could switch it back to normal, and this shows you like some guides and some other stuff. So there's quite a bit that does go into this stuff. But then then you can have a book file. And so every one of these, like, so this is called 2. And it's called 2 because chapter 2. Right? But then there's another file that has the book images, and it'll say, and what that does is it says, here's the order I want the chapters to be in. And you could just drag them around. If you say, I actually want chapter 3 to be chapter 2, then you can drag it around. And it renumbers all of your pages for you. It takes care of all of that. You can set like, well, this is the beginning of the book, so I want it to be the little Roman numeral pages. Then I want it to start over at page 1 at this point. It could do all of that. It's really powerful, but it's a lot different than like a word processor like Microsoft Word or Pages or something like that. But so this is something, again, just something to think about. If you wanted to use this as a template for some sort of workbook, like I'm happy to share that, you know, so you just come up with a concept, which is what does this thing look like? What are the numbers for the chapters and stuff like that? And then you start building it. And so the next thing that I would share would be like dictionary software maybe, but I'll stop and see if there's any thoughts or questions. So of course, Outdegone, you found pull tab pictures. I'm telling you, they don't exist.
It's only because you Googled it first and now the internet knows, but I just sent it to you.
Oh, there it is. That's a great picture of one. Okay. Well, maybe I just don't know what I'm.
I have a bunch. I'll put them together and I'll shoot them your way or put them in a drive or something. But
Whole
a
bunch.
couple summers ago, I was in Huna and there was a bear laying on his back in a ditch and he was picking Waskan Plegu like this, one at a time.
Yeah, and so like if you guys wanted to be contributors to this whole thing, like what you could do is you could just I could set up a folder within that language images with your name on it. And that way if people, you know, it's nice to give folks credit, but you don't have to credit me for stuff. Like if you want to use like if the illustrations, like I made or altered from stock images most of those, and you don't have to put my name. You could just take it and use it. It doesn't matter to me. Um, I wanted things to push a lot more towards like improving the whole language program than making sure you put people's names on things. Because it's a little jarring for me for people to say, hey, you use this quote from this elder that I recorded. You need to put my name on it or you're plagiarizing me. I'm just like, what are we doing? You know, and so I understand this is academia. I understand that this is, you know, I know the rules. I'm not going to take somebody's essay and say it's mine or anything like that. I'm not trying to take someone's work and say that it's mine. But I like a collaborative environment where we're doing a lot less of the ego manipulation stuff and we're doing more of the contribute to the whole type of thing. But, you know, so if you have pictures, you have images that you want people to use, uh, let me know and I'll set you up with the folder and you can just drag them into this Google folder, upload it, and you'll have editing. Yeah, I don't really give people editing power over most of the folders just because if somebody accidentally deleted something or moved something, like it's too much work to try and maintain it. But you do have access to that information.
Do you advise against using like our fam's photos and stuff? Like our things around the house?
Well, so if it's your personal stuff, I think it's okay. If you're going to use images of children, I'd be pretty careful about that. I'd probably keep those, like those would be for the in-house
Yeah.
documents. So like in the Aha Punana Leo, like there's so much stuff with Oiwi TV and the Hawaiian language stuff that you can go find in Hawaii, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that they make for their school and it's not really for public distribution. So that's one of the conversations to be had there. And some people are fine. You know, it's just their kid going to the store or something. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, that's the one thing is like with kids, I tend to shy away from that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I think it's fine if it's just sort of like grandma and grandchild go to the store. But we're also doing a workshop for illustration and stuff. And I know some of you are illustrators here as well to just say, well, then we could draw it. If it's a kid, then we could just draw it. And so that's the other thing is sort of looking at the journey of the Hawaiian language and how they went from taping the words over all these books that they went and bought that were written in English to just developing their own content. Because they said, well, we want to look at this book and see Hawaiian people. And we also want to read this book and feel like those are Hawaiian things, right? And so there's a whole bunch of tropes in children's literature that I think are maybe they work for translating, but some of them they're just a little tired. Especially if the whole thing is built on a rhyme scheme. It's like it's fine for teaching foundations of English, but it usually doesn't work very well when you put it into an indigenous language. Other thoughts?
Kunish for sharing those. I don't know if I missed a link, but because I got booted for a split second there, but I was wondering if you shared the link for the images in the beginning Shingit, because I know personally I've photocopied and then cut out the photos and then taped it to a piece of paper and then made several copies of those, like for a scavenger hunt. But I think that having the images to be able to manipulate them is easier. Sheesh. Thank you. I'll bookmark that.
I just put it back in the chat, and then you gotta click to get there, but you can always go to clinkitlanguage.com curriculum. Then there's a little thing called Clinkit curriculum folder, and then when you go there, you go to language, images, and illustrations, and then you'll see that folder in this. So it's a little bit, requires a bit of clicking around, but maybe just put a shortcut in your web browser or something. And if you ever find anything that you say, I can't find the picture of this thing that's in beginning Clinkit, let me know and I'll go find it, put it in there. Because as it goes through, it went through an update and I might have changed some of the pictures. I found like a picture that doesn't have anything in it because some people thought the picture was like the word for lemonade because it had lemons in it or something. So, yeah, okay.
Be cool if you can make illustrations too. You can make like the opening for a movie. That little, I made one of those. It's like this guy falling. It's cool. You have to check it out. But it just took like 20 minutes. I mean, it was pretty fast, and I think it was spent more time.
Let's do this. No formal stuff, but let's say for next Wednesday, bring something that you made. Just show us something. Just show us anything. And then we'll just have a little show and tell, and we'll just probably do more of the same. Like I'll show you some specifics. If you have questions about this stuff, you could do trial versions of a lot of this software. You could do student pricing for a lot of this software. If you end up getting contracts to do this type of work, sometimes you can offset it. If this is what you do for a career, it's a tax write-off, and so I'm not trying to encourage you all. I don't work for Adobe. It'd be nice. Adobe, send me some stuff like t-shirt, whatever. But I do think their software is pretty good. They do sucker you into this monthly thing. So you got to pay them every month, but you get access to a whole lot of software. So with that one sort of price, which I think is like $15 a month or something for students. I don't know exactly, but then you have Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign. You have Adobe Animate, so you could do animation right there. And so we'll talk more next week about that kind of stuff, like creating more content. So like how, and just trying to brainstorm. Like let's go make some stuff. Let's make fully animated versions of our stories that doesn't require English translations. Let's go make comic books. Let's go make, whatever the thing is, let's make it in our language. And then we can also explore ways to get this stuff published. I do think the future is going to hold like some sort of Alaska Native Language Media network that does a lot of this stuff. And whether it's not like they have to do it all, but they will know how to publish it and how to move it forward. And let's make movies in our languages. Let's do all that stuff. So that's what I'm hoping to do for the rest of our Wednesdays through this class. So Mondays, back to the books, back to reading, talking about the sort of philosophy of stuff. And then we're going to start having some conversations about how to get our final documents done for this class, which I think will all be just big, huge, fun collaborations. Okay, thanks, gang. Have a great weekend.
Sheesh.
Finish cheese. Thank you.
Okay.
Kunish.
Oh, wow.